Hello, welcome to Motherhood Unlocked, the on-demand portion. I'm here with Aisha Fanning, a doula, and also lots of other things.
Yeah.
I forget your other credentials, but car seat tech in addition to that. And we're going to talk a little bit about car seats and some of the questions that maybe come up for you, and then also tips and tricks that she's seen. For full disclosure, that maybe like I as a parent even, or you as a parent, haven't even thought of. It's a common topic now, and I think there's more information out there. I also think that it's shifted from pediatricians doing like answering those questions or doing that.
Yeah.
And so now we're even like fire departments, I think
Yes,
do that,
that's
and
a
they
myth.
don't
Yeah,
do
they
anymore.
don't. It's
So things like that which we don't even realize.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna let you introduce yourself. We'll have a little chat and then we'll do some questions.
Wonderful, yes. So like she mentioned, I'm Aisha Fanning. I have been a car seat tech since 2015 and a car seat tech instructor since 2017. So I have 4 children of my own, and I can say in the realm of the 18 years that I've been a mom,
Yeah.
car seat instructions and rules and regulations have changed. Now in Nevada, the law is 2 years old and 20 pounds.
Okay.
2 and 2. 2
Okay.
and 20.
Yeah, and so that's one that comes up a lot is like
Yeah.
when do they move from rear facing to forward facing?
Yeah.
And that's a great guideline and rule to start with. And then that's in addition to the car seat itself
Correct.
and the child.
Yes, so beyond the 2 and 20 of Nevada law, there are also regulations and weight restrictions on the car seats.
Okay.
That'll say turn this around when the child reaches a certain age and or height or weight.
Okay.
And that is important because that is for the integrity and correct usage of the seat as well.
Right. And then one of the other questions that I thought of, we didn't do this with our kids up to this point, but I have seen some rotating car seats.
Yes.
Where, so even from a PT standpoint, physical therapy standpoint, some kids who are medically fragile, that is helpful to have them kind of rotate because they can't really help you to get themselves out, or potentially if you have maybe a diagnosis like restrictions or fibromyalgia or any kind of thing as a parent, it's kind of helpful to turn them to get them out so they're facing you. Is that something that's like okay? I mean, obviously it's being sold, but is that like, how do you look at that as a person?
So rotating car seats are something that are newer and they are kind of cool the way they look.
I mean,
like
they look cool. They look fun.
Yeah. And so you have to remember that the manufacturers aren't able to put anything on the market to sell, at least in America, that it hasn't been tested rigorously.
And especially as a item that's being added to a vehicle.
Correct.
Like, I do feel like that's a little different than maybe some other industries.
Yes.
Like
there are some laws that
industry.
there's restrictions and guidelines that they have to follow. And so, yes, that's why you're seeing them more, from the bigger brands to like your even flows that have the rotating or revolving car seats.
Yeah, and then obviously too, like medically, when I've worked with families as a PT in potentially other settings, medically fragile kids have their entirely own different course that they go through or like routes that they go through for adaptive car seats. If that's truly like if there's feeding tubes, if there's really low tone and we can't manage the harness, if there are those things. So that may not apply to most people, but just as for understanding of it can go really across.
There's even a special needs car seat tech certification for that. So
in addition to that.
In addition.
I think, so other than that, I think that we can, what are the things that you're going to cover, like generally, that you're going to cover when we go through kind of the hands-on demonstration?
Yeah, great. So we're going to cover the selection of which seat is best for your child and your vehicle. We're going to cover the location. That's a big one. What's the safest seat position for my child? We're going to cover the direction, which we're 0 to 6 months is going to be rear facing. And then we're going to cover installation, how to properly install, and then the harness, correctly installing.
Cool. Okay, so basic stuff you go through, that you think about, but you don't necessarily have that guidance.
Correct.
I will say installation is my least able thing. What is the word I'm looking for? Like least helpful thing for me. Proficient. I'm not very proficient when it comes to actually like installing it in. I've tried, and I'm like, I can't get the thing to hook in the thing, and so my husband, my husband just
That's okay.
And if it comes out, I'm like, you ready to put it back in, right?
Yeah. And they made it easy, they being the manufacturers, because installation is so important.
Correct.
So
right, I'm like, this has to be like, this feels still a little jiggy. He's like, it's fine. And I'm like, no, can you tighten it a little bit more? So it is tricky. One thing I will say, you mentioned when we were talking prior that following organizations, you typically follow organizations versus like a private individual who's doing car seat instruction. So there is, with like, you've probably seen this with your kids change too, as far as like, there's so much more information and people able to be experts on things generally. So it's like, wow, this is really available, which is great. With that, probably either even going in person to local opportunities for car seat fits, like you can follow the people.
Yes, follow
but
the
then
people.
If you feel like that helps you, but then also like they're not necessarily going to be able to be touching the car seat that you have, knowing what your baby's, but they're not going to ask you what your baby's weight is and all of that, even though it's like a number. They're probably not going to get into that just because of liability across the internet anyway. So we'll go through a few different areas locally in Vegas where you can go like in person to have that check happen. But just a reminder, like it's helpful to have information. We just don't need
from the correct sources, right? So if you're following someone on social media, qualify them. Are they a certified car seat tech, or are they a concerned parent? Those are two totally different things.
Show me your credentials. That's as far as just understanding that. But I do like even some stuff that was here, especially with the heat, where it's like, oh, you know, putting the blanket over the car seat or the stroller or whatever to help them not be hot is actually worse. So that's something that, you know, you don't really know. Like my first child was born in Seattle, and so it's a totally different weather climate there. And so it was like, oh, I didn't even think about that. It didn't really happen for us that often, but it was like that information was just out on the internet. And so it was like, okay, that kind of stuff is really bite-sized and helpful in that respect. Okay, well, I think we're going to head into the visual part, and thank you so much for that background.
All right, let's get started.